Kelsier didn't just want to overthrow an empire, he wanted to become something much harder to kill than you would imagine, a symbol. But to achieve anything they had so much work to do. So how did Vin, Kelsier and the crew get anything done? Was the plan really worth it? Was it going to actually work? Spoiler alert for Mistborn: The Final Empire. Everything begins with the recruitment of the Skaa. The Skaa have had a rebel army since the beginning of the Final Empire, and they've accomplished virtually nothing. So building a new army for Jeden was always going to be difficult, not just because of the lack of the success stories to convince anyone to risk their lives, but because Luthadel itself has been built to suppress rebellions before they even begin. And the crew has to fight allomancy with allomancy, and you'll know later what I mean by this. While Vin trains her emotional allomancy, she watches Breeze. He leads a group of emotional allomancers during the secret meetings for recruitment. They go to smithies and plantations during lunch hours and meet with a lot of Skaa that seem interested in meeting the survivor of Hatzin. During those meetings they inflame the hatred of those people towards a Lord Ruler. They also suppress the fear they have for the Empire itself, and the distrust they might feel towards Kelsier and the crew. This, along with the growing legend that the survivor of Hatzin is acting around Luthadel, begins to work, but it does take some time. To achieve this, they do have to take risks. Kelsier going to multiple locations and Breeze leading and risking many of his fellow emotional allomancers. They need to recruit thousands for the plan to work, all in under a year, and eventually they do. After training under Ham for months, they are then passed over to Jeden, the one that currently is the leader of the Skaa rebellion. But there's a little problem here. They do have the training, they have the weapons, but they lack real combat experience. And to get this, Jeden decides to just try, act and fight against a small part of the Imperial garrison. A little bit, a tiny speck of the garrison that were outside of Luthadel. It was a complete massacre. They lose most of the army, just a small group of it survives. This forces the group to concentrate their efforts in inciting this noble house war, which was already on the way with the works of Kelsier and Vin. The plan was not to fight the Empire face to face, it was to partly destroy its economy, to turn the nobles against each other, and to give the Skaa something they never really lost, but they needed more than ever: hope. Marsh, Kelsier's brother, joined the group in order to gather information from the Empire's inner working and the Obligators. He infiltrates them. He is a seeker, someone with the allomantic ability to track whoever is using other allomantic abilities. And he just needed to forge a couple of documents to pose as a low-ranking noble to be able to get in. But once inside, he proves to be a bit too capable, too determined, to the point the Steel Inquisitors try to keep an eye on him. One night, he had to meet with Vin and Kelsier again, and when they arrive, he's not there. First, they see the pool of blood coming from the room they were going to meet in, and inside, well, you could see bone, flesh, and other kinds of gore that could not really be described, at least not understanding of the English language. It was most likely the thing that the Inquisitors had got to him before they did. But before Kelsier lost his shit and did something that could ruin everyone's lives, Vin stops him and finds something that Marsh probably hid before everything went down. A piece of paper. It had a map. It had information about how the city was built to suppress rebellions. You see, they had strategically placed like control centers all around the city, and they had emotional allomancers there to keep the city under control. Soothed. This is obviously a breaking point for Kelsier, and he decides to return to the place of his suffering, the pits of Hatzin. You see, to retrieve the geodes of Atium before they become the metal itself, they have to use slaves. They cannot use allomancers because the mere presence of allomantic pulses just destroys the geodes. So, in a rage, he tears through the pits, destroying the place, bringing down tunnels, and just collapsing all the geodes of Atium, destroying the government's primary source of wealth, a way to keep the nobles on a leash. This is partly because he would help the plan, but also in a way to avenge his brother. Over the course of nearly a year, the crew's plan began to actually take effect. We see more noble deaths, we see more accidents happening around them, more attacks on mansions, more attacks on keeps. Slowly, paranoia spreads through the final empire. At first, the nobles maintain appearances, but as the months pass, even the dances Vin attends become colder, more tense. You see how powerful houses like Hastings begin to fall. For those who know, even House Venture is in trouble for the loss of the Pits of Hassin. Trust evaporates and fear takes over the place. Noble houses begin to close ranks, forming alliances where they can. Other houses simply flee Luthadel in order to avoid getting killed. Assassinations increase. Ambushes become common. The nights grow more and more dangerous. The Skaa already avoided the night out of superstition. Now the nobles do too, afraid of political enemies. Everyone is on edge, armed, paranoid, ready to strike at an unseen enemy. And that gives Kelsier and his crew exactly what they need to operate. The plan as crazy as Kel. By this point, Kelsier's plan becomes clear. They had just 1 year to do the following. Set a bait for the Imperial garrison to leave the city undefended. It had to be something big and threatening enough for require this kind of manpower to lift their posts, but not something as dangerous and threatening to invoke the use of all Inquisitors and make their army evaporate in minutes. Then they had to get the city out of whack with the Noble War. The basis of the structure of power in Luthadel are the nobles. They perpetuate the system, they feed the lines of obligators and Inquisitors, and they move the economy, including the Atium. A plan to destroy the trust of the noble houses on each other makes the city tremble. And if this leads to them weakening each other both economically and militarily, making them kill each other's allomancers in the process, would certainly be advantageous for the crew's plans. And Vin and Kelsier will make sure this shit happens. Lastly, with the city in shambles and without proper guards, the crew wants to infiltrate Kreddick Shaw, the Lord Ruler's palace, and take his Atium stash, kidnapping the whole empire's economy away. I keep mentioning Atium, and for those who don't know, it is the most important metal there is, the most powerful and the most expensive one. Everyone is dying for some Atium, and the Lord Ruler uses it as kind of like a leash to keep the nobles in check. Atium, what it does is give the user the ability to see other people's future, just a couple of seconds ahead, forming some sort of a shadow that would predict their movements. If two allomancers are using it at the same time, they will just see a bunch of shadows, just because every time you see each other, you're reacting to your possible futures. Getting a hold of the riches of a god simply would just change how the world works. God versus God. Kelsier's real plan featuring Oresur. We had the destruction of the pits. We have Vin, or Valet, killing Sean Elariel, with a lot of witnesses to prove this. We have Renaud the Noble buying a lot of weapons for them. All of this leads to the confrontation that will reveal Kelsier's real plan. With Renaud targeted by the Inquisitors, his real persona, the Kandra Oresur, will make a move that will change the fate of the Empire. Renaud, Spook, and a bunch of the servants are going to be executed in a square in Luthadel in front of thousands, as an example for what's been going on with the crew. On the way to the execution, everything changes. Kelsier intercepts the caravan and strikes, saves them, and in the process, he fights one-on-one with an Steel Inquisitor and in front of the whole audience. Thousands of Skaa witnessing the legend himself, he kills a Steel Inquisitor. It's the moment that changes it all. He saves a bunch of Skaa, he kills the Inquisitor, and when everything was going kind of like for the better, the racket and the emotion most people felt just died. In that moment, the god appears. The one that controlled everything and wanted to keep a tight grasp on the world. The Lord Ruler appears. He's tall, long black hair, strong, looks incredibly well to have been ruled for over 1,000 years. Kelsier did this also because he had gotten this idea from Sazed. When the legend became real, the survivor of Hassin, he had accomplished a big part of his plan. He had become a symbol. You see, during the story, he has also many moments of anxiety and doubt. He talks to Sazed, who is a scholar that mainly focuses on religion. He chose him a religion where there are many martyrs, people who inspire their followers and die, becoming the main source for their actions. from that day on, and he decides to act like them. The Lord Ruler appears. Face to face, Kelsier steps up to him and tells him that he, Kelsier, represents something he could never kill: hope. And the response? Just a single backhanded strike. At least that's how I imagine it. Kelsier flies through the air and it's impaled by the Lord Ruler, who just lives for the carnage to begin. That same night, something odd happens, because the survivor perished, but something else was going on. Something bigger. During the night, Skaa flooded the streets. Something they never do for superstition. People claim they've seen the survivor walking among them, leading them. Thousands of Skaa get out of their houses. The survivor they've seen is Orasur, the Kandra. He was part of Kelsier's plan all along. The plan to become a martyr, to become basically a god. And then it happens, and the Skaa rise, thousands of them, giving the crew one final chance to face the Lord Ruler, and leaving the 11th metal in Vin's hand. This rebellion didn't begin with an army. It began with a man who chose to become a legend, to fight a god.